Alright, so this time we are doing a project machine. This is an Asus custom built. We've looked at this one before. It's got the Core i7 in it, 4770K, 3.5 gigahertz. It also has the Mushkin Redline RAM in it. I believe it's a total of 16 gigs. I think I mistakenly may have said 32 previously, but it is 16. Now, there's a few issues with this board. It needs to be cleaned, and we've got some fasteners that are rusted here, and I'm hoping that the rust and corrosion can be cleaned off successfully, and that this board actually is okay. Assuming that that is the case, I think we've got a lot of great components here, and this giant Corsair power supply would be perfect to set up all these bays with, of course, many of our hard drives that we salvaged. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started on just taking some things out of this, getting it cleaned up, and seeing if it's possible, if we can get this really set up to go and maybe even get it booting to something. Okay, so we've got some of the general stuff out of the way here. And honestly, this is probably one of the cleanest things I pulled out of the recycler. Now, there's a little bit of rust corrosion here or there, but I think we're going to be okay. We can just pull these old screws out and sink some new screws into this motherboard. And we're just going to clean this in the case and just see, honestly, if this is something we can go ahead and get fixed up. So let's see if we can get it fixed up and see if one of these hard drives has a bootable operating system. Alright, so we've got the board out and the heatsink lock dismantled and off, so we can get that cleaned up. And honestly, the board doesn't look too bad. I think the rust is pretty well isolated just to the screws, and I think the discoloration is just from the moisture that kind of built up and spread. And there's a couple of other minor areas, but I think it's going to clean up just fine and hopefully still be perfectly usable. Okay, so my big trick with cleaning anything off of a board, like rust spots or corrosion, it's just a little bit of alcohol and a toothbrush. This one's never been used. Fresh out of the box, soft bristles, and you can see it's cleaning up just fine. Let's do the rest of the board and see if we can get this running. Okay, now when we're talking water damage to a motherboard, you always want to take a little look at the rear of the board or the back side of the board. In this case, you can see some of these superfluous connectors are a little orange. I did clean them up with the alcohol and the toothbrush, kind of like this screw here. The camera will focus right. They're totally fine. Basically, the contacts are still good. There's enough metal touching. I don't think that's going to be an issue. You can always heat those up with a soldering iron to clear off some of that corrosion if it, for whatever reason, isn't functional. And then, of course, your screw ports. Those are completely orange on the backside, so I did clean those up. So, yeah, I mean, for water damage, just remember, if it's an electronic and there's no voltage running through it when it gets wet, some of the metals that can rust may, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's damaged beyond being repairable, and certainly doesn't mean that it needs to be replaced. A lot of the times you can still do some repair work. Now, I mean, we're talking tons and tons of traces on the back here. If you had to jump or something, it'd be pretty tough to trace down, but it's not to say it's impossible. And again, you know, it all depends on what you're comfortable with and what you're really looking to do. I think in this case, it probably rusted at the scrapyard. I don't think it rusted and then somebody got rid of it thinking it wasn't usable, like after a flood or something. In this case, I think it's just a victim of time. But, you know, if you do happen to get like some water damage to your electronics, don't be afraid. If they're not plugged in, no current running through them, and even if they are, they may still be able to be cleaned, may still be able to be saved. Alright, so we got the motherboard back in place, and instead of using the old screws, I used some from the cases we've recently dismantled, because they were in a little bit better shape. That one's a little rusty, but not going to affect performance, of course. So, got this all put back together. Now we just need to address the rust on this, which I've got a little trick for that should pretty much passively clean it up. Let's go try it out. Alright, so we've got our heatsink lock right there with its screws that were rusty. Plain white vinegar, pour the vinegar on top. Over time, it'll loosen up the rust. Take our toothbrush, clean the rest off, give it a quick rinse, all done. Alright, so the vinegar treatment worked. Everything's cleaned up about as good as it possibly can be. So let's go ahead and get this back on the board. Okay, now that we got things cleaned up, I've got stuff plugged back in, and we've got the processor all cleaned off, and we'll get the heatsink on there with some fresh paste, and then it's basically just reassembly, and then we'll throw some hard drives in this and see if we have any that boot. Okay, so if you'll forgive the obvious wonky cable management here, everything has been installed and everything is wired up for power, although I've not yet connected the system to any of the cables. I've got this free hanging solid state drive. The only reason for that is because I know there's a copy of Windows installed on it, so the other hard drives in here, they're mechanical hard drives, so I didn't know if they had anything on them yet. They all got pulled out of a pile, so they're very likely been wiped or were just used for storage. But a total of 4 terabytes in mechanical hard drive. I don't remember how big this one was, but we'll check that out. I'm hoping that it'll boot from the solid state. Ideally, that's what I'd like for it to do. I do have a full cased solid state drive, but I figured just for easy access, we'll try this one first, because there's really not a great place in this case to mount it. So we're going to go ahead and just finish putting in the final screws on the other side and go ahead and power this up and see, will it boot? Okay, we've got everything wired in, everything connected. I'm going to go ahead and give power to the system. And I believe this power button on top. Ooh, we've got LED lights in here. That's interesting. Looks like the processor fan has not kicked on. I'm not sure why, but that's okay so far. I do hear some hard drive sounds, so I know the drives are working. No display. Okay, so no display at all, and still no hard drive is booting. And no fan on the processor right now, but everything else seems to be moving. All the other fans are going. So we're going to just take a step back and reevaluate here. Okay, so we fired it up again. We've got hard drive sounds on all the drives. Solid state, no idea. No display at all. So a couple of reasons that may be. One of them being none of these hard drives are bootable. But usually we get to a BIOS screen or something. And it looks like the memory's okay. At least the LED indicator seems to suggest that that is the case. The other thing I'm wondering is the processor fan is not starting, which I don't know if it's just heat regulated or what the case may be there. But again, no display. Very, very odd there. So we'll go ahead and maybe swap display cables, see if maybe just the DVI is the issue, and go from there. Alright, this time we are connected to VGA. I did swap the plugins for the upper fan and the processor fan. Let's just see. Well, the processor fan isn't going. Of course, the cable, because I moved it, stuck in the fan there. I think maybe that processor fan is just crapped out. Because it's trying to move, but it's not. Oh, there it goes. Just took it a second. Alright, so we've solved the processor fan issue. Rear fan is having some weird fan problems now. But still no display. And no beep code either. As far as I can tell, the memory is okay. I don't actually know what this button does, so we're going to push it. And I think that might be a reset switch. With that, the processor fan kicked on right away. And now our little red indicator up there for the DRAM appears to be flickering. Rear fan's intermittent, but I guess that doesn't matter. Again, no beep codes, but I'm not actually seeing a beep speaker on this board either, so whether or not that makes any difference, I don't know. Still no display. I think at this point it must be a memory problem. So the only thing I can think of is reseating the memory. It looks like we've got a flashing DRAM indicator light. So we'll have to look up this board and maybe see if it gives us any more information. I like to just, oh, now it's solid. So maybe that's all it took. And with that, still an orange no display indicator on our monitor. So yeah, at this point, it's got to be a memory issue. That's the only thing I can think of that would be holding the system back. Everything else seems to be kicking up normally. Alright, so I don't know why I didn't think to check this before, but the CMOS battery appears to be in terrible shape. So popped a new battery in there, put all the RAM back. I think the memory's good, so this is kind of the logical next step. Let's go ahead and fire it up. Make sure the fans aren't hitting any cords again and are spinning. We're spinning up. And I hear hard drive noises. But there again, we've got no display. Nothing on the VGA, anyway. Which has me puzzled. I am not honestly sure what could be causing that issue at this point. Again, no beep codes. I hit the memory reset, and that hasn't seemed to have affected anything. And honestly, I don't see really any other indications of what could possibly be going wrong at this point. So it's got some display issue. What that display issue may be, I don't know, but everything else seems to be functional. So we're going to have to do a little digging and see what we can figure out. Okay, so after much trial and error, I found that we actually had two bad RAM chips, but I did have some extra DDR3, two matching Kingstons. It's only an extra two, so it still brings us to 10 gigabytes of RAM. So that's better than 8. Got the solid state hooked up again. I just want to see if it's bootable, basically. If not, we can always throw an OS on it and make it bootable. But for now, let's just see what happens when we fire up the system here. Okay, that's odd. Nothing happened at all that time. Let's try and hit the button again. Okay. Well, the monitor's on, so we have a new problem all of a sudden. Let's check it out. Okay, we've got hard drive sounds. Oddly, no fans. And for whatever reason, it seems like there's no power to the board now, which is very confusing, to say the least. So let's try and hit the reset button. Okay, powered down properly. And again, we've got hard drive sounds. Nothing happening on the board. This is very bizarre because all that's changed is I put in some RAM chips. So let's examine our power and see what's happening. All right, we've reseated some connectors here. Got the power switch on, and there we go. Got some LED indicators going. Our memory light went out, which now I know means, of course, that it's testing the memory and everything is good. If the light goes out, should not stay on the whole time. That looks good. VGA showing display power, and we've got a boot, at least to BIOS. Let's just see here. All right. So it wants us to run setup. So let's get into the setup utility. All right, so we've got a couple of fans that apparently have issues, at least to that there. But we've got basically 2 low RPM fans. They're spinning, so they are fine. We've got Kingstons and Mushkins, so they're not matching, but it should be fine. Obviously, date and time is wrong because we changed the CMOS battery. And looks like we have 1 potentially bootable hard drive. All right. So far, so good. Let's just see here. Silent fans. All right. So far, so good there. Let's check out the advanced mode. So far, so good. And let's just go ahead. Let's just go ahead and let it go. We're just going to exit without changes. Yeah. And let's just see if it boots to anything. Definitely got some hard drive noises. All right, well, suffice to say that it boots, but I think multiple hard drives in here have bootable software, so we're going to try and get into one of them and determine which one is the solid state if we can, because I'd like to make that the bootable drive. And until we know that, unfortunately, we're just going to have to backdoor our way in. So let's see what we can find out. Well, this is interesting. So we've got a total of 4 hard drives connected, but we've got 7 drives showing. So 1 or 2, possibly more, of these drives is partitioned. So we have to figure out, A, which ones are solid state, and which one is the one we need to select for booting, and is that the best one? So we've got some work to do before we just simply backdoor in here, but we'll see what we can find out. All right, well, after much futzing, we did get the solid state set as the primary boot device. Got able to get it set up so everything is stripped of the prior domain and prior information from the old users. And we've got a fully bootable Windows 10 super storage machine. Really excited for this. I know this is a lengthy video with a lot of fits and starts, but got ourselves a pretty powerful PC here. Really excited to use this as a backup system. Okay, so once again, if you enjoyed this content and want to see more, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button, and stay up to date with me and all my goings on. Definitely share with your friends if you have anybody who'd be interested in this content. I plan on doing a lot more videos, a lot more in-depth stuff coming up And certainly we'll be playing around with the rest of these drives to see what else we've got going on. And definitely have a couple of other projects in the works, so excited for that. So certainly stay tuned. Again, I am Urza Master. I am also 1/3 of the Digital Escape podcast, which is available here on YouTube and on podcast platforms. Give us a subscribe over there. Follow us on the podcast socials. You can check us out on Facebook, Digital Escape Podcast. You can also check me out, Urza Master, on Facebook as well. Connect with me there if you have any comments or concerns or want to reach out. And certainly check out our podcast videos when you have a chance. We also have a weekly episodic podcast called the Warp Core Podcast, which is Star Trek specific. We have a new episode that's going to be going up tonight. So head on over there. Again, it's Digital Escape Podcast. Give us a subscribe here. That's a YouTube exclusive, the Warp Core Podcast. And hope you enjoy it. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.